Shalom, mishpucha. Shalom, family. Mishpucha is a Hebrew word. It means family. We're the mishpucha, the family with a Jewish heart, made up of Jewish and non-Jewish people, where the middle wall of separation has come down to form one new humanity, one new man. A species that never previously existed. And I love what Paul says, that when this middle wall of separation comes down to form the one new man, the one new humanity, which is Yeshua, Jesus, the Messiah, it makes a complete dwelling place for God. My guest, by way of telephone, is Dr. Michael Brown. And if you've read my book, They Thought for Themselves, the book that literally God came to me in a dream and told me to write this book of testimonies. One of the very important, significant testimonies is Dr. Michael Brown. He's president of Fire School of Ministry. He has a Ph.D. from New York University in Near Eastern Languages and Literatures. He reads, writes, or understands at least a dozen Semitic languages. He's considered by most, myself included, the top scholar in the Messianic Jewish movement, and he's just come out with a book that, have you ever had a question you'd like to ask a rabbi, but you were intimidated, afraid, or even, forget a rabbi, even ask a Jewish person? Well, the title of this brand new book is What Do Jewish People Think About Jesus, and other questions Christians ask about Jewish beliefs. Now, why would you be interested in Jewish beliefs? Because there is no way you can understand the New Testament and the nuances of the New Testament and the richness of the New Testament if you don't understand the information that Dr. Brown has about Jewish people. And as a matter of fact, Michael, I found it interesting, and I believe it might have been the foreword or one of the endorsements of the book was an individual that has been in Jewish ministry for years. And he said it was amazing how many new things he learned by reading this book.
Well, I'm thrilled to hear that. You know, for years, we would get questions coming to our website about all kinds of issues, spiritual issues, life issues, revival issues, etc. And our staff is able to handle those. But then we get all these questions about Jewish things, ranging from, should Christians keep a seventh-day Sabbath, to, was the New Testament really written in Hebrew, to, should Christians unconditionally support Israel, or is there another covenant that God has with the Jewish people, and what about replacement theology, and on and on. And these questions would keep coming to me. I never had time to answer them fully. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to write a book. I'll take all the major questions that we've gotten, think of the other major ones that come up that are of real interest, and throw in a few bonus ones that'll be fascinating for Christians to read and enlightening for Jewish believers to read from every background, and put the book together. So we've gotten really encouraging responses, in fact, better than I was expecting.
Well, let me ask you, the number one question we get here at Messianic Vision has to do with the Sabbath. And then connected with that is the biblical festivals. From a Christian viewpoint, does a Gentile Christian or a Messianic Jew have to worship on the Sabbath, Saturday, have to observe the biblical festivals to be right with God?
Well, see, that's the key word, have to. Is there an obligation? In other words, the same way we are obligated to love God and love our neighbor as ourselves, the same way we're obligated to take the gospel into all the world, are we obligated, are we commanded by God to keep the Sabbath or else? Are we commanded by God to keep the feast or else? Certainly that's not the relationship we have with the Torah today, and it's unfortunate that in some Messianic circles there's not only teaching that all Jewish believers are obligated to observe the Torah, but all Gentile believers are also obligated to observe the Torah. When we put that emphasis on it, and I have a whole section of the book that just deals with these kinds of questions, when you put that emphasis on it, it's the wrong emphasis. It does not understand the relationship that we have with the law, with the Torah today. If you flip it around and say, are these gifts from God? Is there something that can be learned? Is there something beneficial? Is there something prophetic and spiritual about these things? Is there value in the churches and the Messianic congregations taking hold of some or all of these things? Absolutely.
Well, let me go a step further. we know historically things were changed, and not changed for very honorable reasons, and all the biblical feasts were literally excluded from Christianity, and everyone needs a culture. Why not have a biblical culture but with freedom?
Yeah, listen, why is it right to celebrate July 4th, Thanksgiving? Christians don't even hesitate about having that on their calendar. And then Easter, dated as the church does, which is separated from Passover. We document that, how that happened around the 4th century, where the church formally said we cannot rely on when the rabbis date things, when the Jewish community date things. We basically have to be separate. So that's why, for example, this year, 2008, celebration of Easter was so different from the celebration of Passover. You know, you may have Christians scratching their heads wondering why that happened. Of course, we open that up in the book. But in point of fact, Christians have no problem celebrating Easter, Christmas. I'm not saying that's of the devil. I'm not saying that's the pit. But hang on. In the Bible, we do have a prophetic calendar that has still not been fully realized, because the Feast of Trumpets points to Yeshua's return, etc.
And not only that, we're going to celebrate these feasts in the millennium according to the written word of God.
Right. So this is something that was commonly known among the early believers. Paul could even make reference to it to the Corinthians, whether he was telling them to literally celebrate a Passover or spiritually do it. They fully knew what he was talking about in 1 Corinthians 5. So why not recapture a biblical calendar infused with the fullness of meaning through the coming of the Messiah into the world, and with a prophetic proclamation as well? How can that be wrong? And isn't that part of a restoration movement to recover these things?